Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be bringing you this educational webinar brought to you by the Fascia Training Academy and the Parisi Speed School from the ground up, fascia, feet, and functional performance. We have two amazing presenters here today in this webinar that's really going to help us unpack the science of understanding ground reaction forces and what's happening with those forces as they get transmitted through that foot complex into the body. And I believe this is an area that we really need to understand as an industry. I believe there's so many injuries taking place out there because we are not training effectively or managing that lower shank and that foot to absorb the ground reaction forces of what we put into it throughout the day, whether it be a high level athlete, an amateur athlete, or just the average person, wanting to walk and do their thing to stay fit. Let me start the introductions. But before I do that, let me set some ground rules for the program today. Feel free to put your comments in the chat. We all will be looking in the chat. We all will be addressing questions either throughout or at the end. We want this to be an interactive program. So tell us where you're from. Tell us what motivated you to get here today and join us today. So let us get to know you. I have a big belief that your network is directly related to your net worth. So network with us, get to know us. We want to learn who you are, what you're about, and how we can help you. That's why we're providing this free webinar. So we're excited to move forward. Let me introduce our speakers here today. I will say this. When I was putting this slide together for Emily, you have unbelievable photos online. I don't know where they all come. You were the easiest to find a good photo. There are so many good ones. I'm like, wow, there's so many good ones here. I don't know which one to use. So you're very photogenic. And I think that was your daughter you were kissing in one of the photos. I think it was on Instagram. It was so adorable. So awesome, Emily. Awesome stuff. Emily is a pioneer and leader in this area of uh, being a functional podiatrist and human movement specialist. She not only is into this, she is into it. It's one thing to be in a career, there's another thing to be into a career. And you can see for yourself what she's done. I know Nabosu's been a key player with the NFL teams. I know Emily has been involved with a lot of NFL teams and being part of their organizations with her products and what she's been doing with those guys. And she's all over the world presenting. Like I said, the founder of the Nabosu Technologies and the education that she provides. Over 40 countries, certified over 20,000, presented over 25,000 professionals. Just a monster in the industry, and she comes to the table, as a doctor of medicine and really a doctor of movement. So she's going to talk to us about where movement begins and understanding the feet as really sensory storytellers. And I believe I really love that title that Emily has put together. And she's going to talk about where movement begins, where gravity meets that ground, like I said before, and ultimately managing that ground reaction forces and learning that language through your feet. So welcome, Emily. After I go, Emily's going to go. Then we've got Rocky Snyder. Now, how can you not do business with a guy named Rocky, right? I mean, like Rocky. I mean, that's. I mean, the all-time. I am here because of that movie, that inspiration. So, Rocky's the CEO and a performance consultant of Rocky Snyder Incorporated. 30 plus years in biomechanics and motor learning and motor neurology. Has his master's degree. And what's interesting, I met Rocky recently, and what spawned this event was me running into Rocky. He was doing a seminar and consulting, and I was up there as well doing a seminar at the UConn men's and women's basketball facility, speaking to their strength conditioning and performance specialists and medical personnel. And Rocky was really making a major impact because they had a ton of lower leg injuries throughout the last number of years and have made tremendous enhancements since Rocky's education. And he's doing this all over the map with high level performance teams. Again, NFL, NBA, and MLB. All these athletes and these coaches are coming to Rocky for his insight from a performance training standpoint and how to manage the foot throughout that training process. So excited to have these people. I am super fired up to be involved, redefining human movement with Rocky Snyder, right? Gravity is the ultimate coach. I love that line, Rocky. Learn to move with it, man, because we are going to be talking a lot about ground reaction forces because that's the deal, man. That's everything. Myself, I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm really dialed in to learning more about fascia and pioneering fascia with these experts. And my whole philosophy, my entire career, has been to align with people that are a lot smarter than you. And these guys are a lot smarter than me. I love being the dumbest guy on the webinar. I love being the dumbest guy in the room because I continue to learn and get better. And that's what it's about, not having an ego and just, putting that aside and trying to do your best to get better. But I'm going to give you a little bit about my story. I will say today's going to be exciting, this webinar. We're going to go through these areas. We're all going to have about 20 minutes. I might take a little extra. We are going to leave 30 minutes for Q&A at the end. So hopefully you do have, a little bit longer than an hour. But we are going to do our best to stay on time and take more Q&A at the end with everyone online. So those are the areas we're going to be focusing on today. Let me start off with a story, and I'm going to give you my story here. I always had a thrill of discovery. I always had that thrill of discovery since I was young, right? We all have that thrill when we're younger. Most young people have that discovery kind of, focus or energy, wanting to learn about everything. And we tend to lose that as we get older. So I want to commend all of you being on this webinar, being live with us today, having that passion and that thrill to discover, to always get better, because that's what it's about. And this world of fascia and the impact it's making on health and performance is major. I mean, this is probably going to be the biggest breakthrough of the 21st century. Even with all the AI technology, we're going to learn even more. I started out as an undersized high school athlete, football player. Coach said, go out for track and field to get faster. I tried all the events. I took a liking to the javelin throw. I was pretty good at it. By my senior year, I made a national meet throwing the javelin. I was a top 10 thrower to qualify for the junior Olympic Games. And I made this meet to try to qualify. And in that competition, I was in second place up until the last thrower and the last throw of the meet. I was so excited I was going to get that USA uniform, that red, white, and blue silk uniform, and I got beat on the last thrower, the last throw of the meet by 2 inches. I was devastated. It was a huge setback, but guess what? That setback set me up for my biggest comeback. That was the paradigm shift for me that stuck with me my entire career. And as I'm going to tell this story, and this is linked to fascia, so I went on to compete in college athletics as a javelin thrower. Yes, a 5'10" North Jersey Italian javelin thrower. And if you want to be great, I set a goal to be one of the best in the world. What do? If you want to be a great javelin thrower? You go to Finland. So at 19 years old, I put a fundraiser together. I flew to Finland and I trained with some of the best. That's Tapios Kouros. He won the gold medal in 1988 in the javelin throw. He's 6'6". I'm a 5'10" North Jersey Italian. I'm not supposed to throw the javelin that far, but I figured how to do it well to become a 2-time Division I All-American and earn myself a full scholarship. I don't say that to impress you, but to impress upon you how I was able to do it was my fascia system. I didn't know what fascia was back then. That's 40 years ago. I do know what it is now. And one of the ways I was training my fascia system was the medicine ball. And that's what I learned from the Finns. I learned a lot about medicine ball training in the 80s. I was doing 10,000 medicine ball throws in a winter. And again, North Jersey Italians not supposed to throw the javelin that far. We're supposed to make pizza, lay brick, give out high interest loans for cash, and if you don't pay us, we break your thumb. Right? That's North Jersey Italian, right, Rocky? I mean, like Rocky, right? Rocky, he was a collector, right? Rocky was collecting the money. Yeah, he wanted to break his thumb. Paulie, you should have broke his thumb. But in any event, so I became high level because of the fascia system and how I trained it. Now, I didn't know that was the case, but it also led the opportunity for me to dive into this industry in the 80s and attack it. at a high level the way I've been attacking it right now. That led me to seminars all over the world. I was traveling. I continue to do that today and network with the best in the world. I might not know it all, but I know enough that determine who knows it all or who knows the most in that area. And that's who I align with to do webinars and do education with. So I've had the privilege to do that with these two unbelievable people. And that medicine ball training led me to lots of discoveries, not only seminars, but the opportunity back in 1989. My first client was Super Bowl MVP Phil Simms because I was on to something unique. I got him to finish second in the long ball competition in the quarterback challenge. So a Super Bowl MVP, 2 years after winning the MVP, I met the head strength coach in the New York Giants, and I started working with Phil Simms because of my understanding of elasticity training, let's call it, right? And how to develop that elasticity. And again, I didn't know it was fascia, but I've been on this thing for 40 years, like our training paradigm at the Parisi Speed School. But now all the science is coming to fruition. Why? Because we have the ultrasound equipment that can see fascia. We didn't have that equipment back then. We didn't have that equipment that can see connective tissue and fascia until about 15, 20 years ago. It started to get popular. And then the last 5 to 10, this equipment got really powerful. Now we can see a lot more. So the impact that it can make, and we're going to talk about that impact and what it makes from the ground up, starting at the foot. But I wanted to give you my story that led, that $500 van. I started $50,000 in debt back in 1992, led to us having 120 locations and in 32 states and international, and we have an affiliate program. We have all these great things to continue to validate what we do. 600 performance coaches. So again, I don't say that to impress you, but to impress upon you. I love bringing in coaches that are smarter than me and just networking and learning. And we want to give that to you. Like, that's the goal. So how did this all start for me, and where are we going today? So this is about from the ground up, right? And when you talk about being from the ground up, you got to start with biotensegrity. And I want to unpack that as much as I can in my next 10 minutes or so here before I hand it off to Emily. But I want to give you a deep understanding of biotensegrity and why it's important and how to manage it and what it means starting from the ground. Because I believe a lot of our issues with our feet being in shoes all the time and these football players being taped all the time, that the foot becomes so locked up it's not able to absorb these ground reaction forces and absorb it through the biotensegrity structure of the human organism. And that's why it intensifies at weak links or tight links in the kinetic chain. So I like to break things down to make them simple and not complex. So I want to break this down and simplify this for you as much as I possibly can. This started for me to understand biotensegrity when my oldest son right now, he's 23. He was in eighth grade here when he started playing eighth grade basketball. He made a pretty high level team. This is an EYBL team. Try to pick out my son in the photo. Might be difficult to pick out who he is. But um, he played on this high level team. And because he's a great shooter, and I started going to these AAU tournaments. And if you know anything about AAU basketball, especially the high level EYBL, it's a Nike sponsored league that Nike pays everything for these athletes. You got to make the team. It's hard to make the team. I went to these tournaments and there was like 50 courts inside convention centers for the whole weekend. And they happen all throughout the spring. 50 courts, there's like 50 basketball games going on at once. And in the EYBL league, these athletes are insane. I've never seen an assembly of athleticism in one location at one time of kids 14, 15, 16 years old playing above the rim, getting down the court in like 5 to 6 strides. I was like, what is going on here? What is happening? You know why I was saying that? I don't see anybody on that court right now that's really, really muscular. So there has to be something different besides muscle that is driving the athleticism to these athletes. That was over 10 years ago. And that's what led me down this road of biotensegrity and really deep diving into fascia and putting it all together and having it make sense. So we live in this constant state of motion, right? We kind of, if you ate something this morning, that food is being digested in the digestive tract at about, you know, less than zero point 0.3 miles an hour. You have electrical impulses firing in your system a million times a second right now. You have plasma pumping through your body at a certain speed. Do you feel any of that? The Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour on its axis. Do you feel that? It's rotating around the sun at 66,000 miles an hour. Do you feel that? No, you don't feel any of that. You know why? Because you lack a fixed frame of reference. That's why you don't feel it. So let's unpack that a little bit. The traditional linear model of Newton's mechanics and the lever system, we in anatomy and exercise biomechanics have applied it to the human body, which I think is not effective to truly understand performance and athleticism. And this approach, this linkage system approach of lever arms and fulcrums, really doesn't make sense when you really look at fascia, connective tissue, biotensegrity. It's not how the body works. It's not how to keep the body resilient, and it's flawed. Now, I'm not saying not to do these types of movements that are structured in this Newtonian fashion in terms of traditional sagittal plane lifting. We need that type of strength. It's very important. We need to continue to do it. But I believe with some athletes, between that and a lot of linear running, it's overplayed, and it locks our system up from a connective tissue standpoint in a certain movement pattern that we aren't even aware of. We're unconsciously incompetent of this concept and understanding. And hopefully this webinar is going to get people to break out of that linear kind of thought process in terms of training and what this Newtonian model is really about. And that is a concept of thinking that the body's more like a machine, and that's not the case. When you think of the body as a machine, you think of, say, a bicycle or a racing bike. To make that bike faster, yes, from a Newtonian model and a linear model, you would make the tires much thinner, you would lighten the frame, you would make it as aerodynamic as possible, and you can do a mathematical equation. And yes, we can make that bicycle faster. Well, the body is not like a machine, it's not like that bicycle. We got to get out of that paradigm. It's completely ineffective in terms of building resiliency. Our body is more like a plant than a machine. It's a self-generating organism. And it's important that our bodies are managed in a way that allows it to naturally develop based on the unpredictable stresses we put on it. And I will stress unpredictable stressors. That's very, very important. Um, as oh, as we move on, I'm going to play a quick video when I visited the Biosphere Project in Oracle, Arizona. This is an interesting video I made, so instead of me telling you, let me play the video and you'll get the idea. I'm here at the Biosphere 2 project in Oracle, Arizona. This project is a 3-acre greenhouse that was started in 1987 and opened in 1991 to perform a 2-year experiment to study different ecosystems. We're going to tie back how the human body can learn from this experiment. This place got started in 1987 and took 4 years to build. This is literally 3 acres of a greenhouse. This place has an ocean, a forest, a desert, marsh. It has everything you would imagine in outdoors, in our environment. What's interesting, and one of the reasons what drew me here was the concept of what happened when they grew trees in this Biosphere project. Once they reached a certain height, some of the trees would tip over because they didn't develop enough stress wood and the root systems underneath the ground. And that's because there was no wind when they built this place. Now, as you can see, they actually pumped in some artificial wind. It's amazing when we think about nature and what nature does with providing different stresses to create resilience.
And that maps us back to fascia. That unpredictable stress creates incredible strength and resiliency for the trees. The lesson is the body is more like a plant and not like a machine. We need unpredictable stressors on our body to build resiliency. That is the key training and developing the fascia system.
So, biotensegrity. Dr. Stephen Levin was in the Natural Museum of History here in Washington, D.C., about 50 years ago. And he was looking at this dinosaur. Dr. Stephen Levin is a spine surgeon. And he was looking at this dinosaur and he was calculating the weight of its head and its neck and determining that the dinosaur didn't have enough muscle tissue to support its head in that position. The same thing with the tail. So imagine building a column of bricks on a 45-degree angle. Unless you reinforce it with massive rebar and it's in the ground really deep, like, really, really deep, it would never, the mortar, it wouldn't be strong enough to support itself. And he kind of did that math and he said, wow, it doesn't make sense. So he was trying to figure it out. He walked outside and he saw this tensegrity structure that was created by Buckminster Fuller, a philosopher, architect, engineer that created these art type structures. And then he realized he put it together because of that structure is a combination of pulling and pushing forces, a combination of tension and compression. He kind of now started to look at the connective tissue system and the integrity and the stability and the balance of what the pulling and pushing forces do. When we look at tensegrity structures, which we're going to do here in a second, the magic of pulling and pushing forces is really the secret to not only how we can support ourselves and how we create athleticism, but to have fluid motion and longevity and movement without pain, having this balanced system. So this is where it started. Buckminster Fuller, Dr. Stephen Levin, putting it all together. This is the foundation of biotensegrity. And I want to kind of unpack this a little bit here. Stop sharing for a second. And I just want to show this screen, or if hopefully I'm the largest on your screen here because it's not on my screen. Carol, if you can make sure I'm the largest. This is a tensegrity model. And in this tensegrity model, we have the struts, which are the wooden pieces that represent the bones, right, of the human body. And then this is compression, it's a combination of compression, and then the tension of the elastic bands, which would be the connective tissue of the body and the muscle. Now, obviously, the bones aren't on bone. If that's the case, you're in trouble, and that's not how the body works. They're separated with this, tensile element. And it's the combination of compression and tension. It's a balanced equilibrium, and it's a very energy efficient structure. So as we move and create ground reaction force, those forces are coming through the entire structure, hopefully in a balanced way. That's really, really important. I should take off my my background. Sorry about that. Is that better? So it's
It was off,
balanced.
Bill.
What's that?
You turned your camera off.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, it makes it blurry. All right. Let me just unblur the background. Okay. So this balanced structure of compression and tension is really the magic. So if there's too much tension in one area, it changes the entire structure, right? Or if one area is really loose, if it becomes really loose, it can change the entire structure. So how we sit, how we move, how we train is affecting this structure, and it starts at the feet. The feet can challenge this structure somewhere else other than the foot and ankle. So if the feet are not right, it can cascade right up that kinetic chain because it has to have balance. If there's not balance, it's going to be uh, too much somewhere. It's going to be hyperactive. That energy has to be dissipated somewhere, and it's going to be dissipated in that area that's bound up or tight, and that's what's going to get injured. So, again, understanding that, it's important to understand this concept of tension and compression, how our bones work together with our connective tissue system to create this balanced equilibrium, very energy efficient approach to our organism. Now, let's kind of wrap up here. Where is my presentation? So we have this balanced structure, and that's an image of the human body in terms of what I just showed you, right? With these elastic bands connected to one another. And if there's tightness in the foot or tightness somewhere in the structure, it's going to move up that kinetic chain. And what's interesting when we look at the human body, we look at this combination of compression and tension. What's really, really interesting, when you go down to the smallest unit of matter, like the atom, right? It's a balance of pulling and pushing forces, just like tensegrity. You've got that core compression, that nucleus of that atom, and the same thing all the way out to the solar system. That core nucleus, the sun, and the pulling, pushing forces of our solar system. This is universal, this principle of pulling and pushing forces down to the human cell. So from the atom to the human cell, and you look at this concept out to the universe and gravity and the pulling, pushing forces of gravity, which gives us our health and well being. Without gravity, it's very challenging to be healthy. We know astronauts, they come out, their bones are porous, they're weak, all these different things. So, the big takeaway here, guys, is pulling and pushing forces, the power of that paradigm, and every aspect of matter, living matter, non-living matter, it's constructed that way down to the atom, to how molecules are constructed, how cells are constructed, the cellular architecture, the cytoplasm, all these elements, and the connective tissue of the fascia. And what am I kind of referencing here? I'm referencing fractal design and self-organization. And when you look at the body and you look at the structure, it has this fractal design, and natural plants and natural living things have this. A tree is a fractal branching design, the branches, right? And it has this tensegrity element to it. So it's all interrelated. Nature is all related. And I believe a big part of nature comes down to tensegrity and biotensegrity. And it starts at the foot. It starts at the foot. And I can't stress enough how important this concept is. This tension and compression concept. It's really where science meets speed, and the vision really fuels performance. So I went a little over. I apologize. Hopefully that is helpful, and that sets us up for Emily to take it from here. I'm going to pass it over to you, Emily, and go to the next phase of this webinar.
Thank you so much. Let me just get my deck up. All right, perfect. Thank you. And Bill, that was honestly the perfect segue into what I'm going to speak about. And for all the listeners, I have 20 minutes, so clearly this is more an abstractness in human movement is how I want you to think about this. And as a functional podiatrist and a human movement specialist, the aspect that I'm very fascinated by is walking. The fact that humans are bipedal, that we stand on our 2 feet, that we are able to interact with the ground and efficiently take 20,000 plus steps a day and then do incredible feats of athletic performance that, as Bill was referring with the basketball players, is very, very efficient. So before I jump into my slides, I actually want to highlight a few concepts that Bill introduced and just highlight them or underline them because they're going to flow into what I say. The first one was Bill's reference to the basketball players that were not heavily muscular, which is what brought this intrigue into fascia. Something that I say all the time is that we were designed to move fascially, not muscularly. And what that means is that we as humans are designed to move efficiently with an element of flow and grace and rhythm. And the more that you can find that, you find an ease in movement. As soon as we shift and we become muscular movers, which people do move muscularly, you are technically working harder than you should be. And this is where the injuries happen, where you get a lot of your tendinitises and things like that. It's also very inefficient, which means it's exhausting. So if you walk muscularly, that is very exhausting to the system. This is what I will see in patients. And then as far as the feet, typically they have a overpronated flat foot that is not creating a stable foundation. So they are not working with the ground and gravity well, and therefore it takes more effort to walk. So that's one example. Second concept that Bill said that I want you to underline and highlight is to challenge the Newtonian mechanical approach to human movement. And there is a way that you can look at human movement. When I teach gait, I was just in Korea teaching 4 days of gait and understanding the human gait cycle and bipedalism. And I think I threw them off because they wanted the mechanical phases of gait and what's happening in the ankle, knee, hip. And that is a way you could look at movement. But instead, I challenge them to think about human movement and gait from a fascial perspective and from this repetitive dance that we have with gravity. So challenge that as well. The swaying like a tree, or that we are more like trees and plants and we adapt to this. I'm actually going to give an exercise at the end, which is swaying like a tree. So I just thought that was just absolutely perfect that Bill said that, because that's what I speak about all the time. And then that we are designed to be energy efficient structures. So that's what I want you to think about as we go into these next several slides. So, key takeaway that I want, first one from my perspective, is that we were designed as Homo sapiens. We are designed to stand on our 2 feet. We are upright beings and we are bipedal. This is a very, very unique presentation or alignment or experience that we have, which is very different from all other animals and primates. The way that our feet are structured and the fact that we walk on our 2 feet. This is a fascinating demonstration of our nervous system, our myofascial system, our neuromuscular system. And it is one that I want you to keep at the foundation of how you look at athletic performance. So our goal is to optimize the foot, because as we stand on our 2 feet, the only contact point between the body and the ground is the foot. So every foot strike or every step that we take is a new opportunity for your foot to strike the ground. That foot striking the ground essentially dictates the way that the entire energy transfer story happens. And if you think about the energetics of movement, or the energetics of locomotion, is really based around this story and this relationship with gravity. And I know that Rocky loves that because his quote. So I'm talking about gravity, Rocky, but I love, love, love to talk about gravity. And at the core of anything you are doing with your clients and athletes, you have to be thinking about gravity and our relationship, and how do we dance with the ground, and how are we utilizing the potential energy that we are getting from the ground. This is very, very, very important. Now, when you think about gravity, this is the most important sensory constant. So gravity is energy. Yes, gravity is obviously going to give us the energy to take the next steps, but it's sensory. This gravity, which is a downward pressure, is also like a proprioceptive hug. So when we think about walking and movement and performance, It is deeply associated with our connection and our perception of our physical body in space. The only way that I can move this canister well on the ground is if I know where it is in space. That is a gravitational story. That is a neurosensory story, which is a fascial story. So the compression and the proprioceptive hug that we get from gravity is fascia, creating body awareness. That awareness extends then down into our foot because this downward pressure of gravity is what creates ground reaction forces. And this is where I truly encourage people to study bipedalism and gait because it teaches you to think about how your client and athlete is interacting with the ground because it's very unique. A squat assessment, a lunge, a step up, they're just different ways that the system is interacting with the ground. Gait, very unique. Within milliseconds, your foot contacts the ground. It gets 1.5 times your body weight in impact. Coming in, you have to quickly absorb it, store it, and release it. And this is happening 20,000 times a day. That system has to be perfect in order for you to move efficiently and not get injured. And it, of course, starts with the ground. So your foot relates to or experiences gravity as ground reaction forces, as impact forces. Foot contact impact is where this story begins, and that is a neurosensory experience. To optimize your relationship with gravity, here on the left, you can see there's 3 steps. Is you have to be able to perceive impact. This is where usually I see things fall apart. There's a delay or an inaccuracy in the perception of impact forces. No one really talks about what actually is impact and how do you perceive it, right? So that's your first step. If your athlete or your client cannot feel the ground, they cannot feel the impact coming in, they're not connecting and really aware of and conscious of the power that that impact is giving them, the rest of the story falls apart. So that is by far number one. Second one is, does your client and athlete understand how to absorb? How does our body innately know how to absorb impact forces? It is not in the cushion of shoes. I am sorry. Yes, the cushion of shoes will absorb the impact, but your system, your foot and ankle system is designed to absorb and to store these impact forces. We just need to understand how to train it to do it if we start to lose that capacity to do that. And then finally, you have to be able to transfer it. How do we transfer it? Of course, that's going to be the fascial story, but it's not just inherent that your athlete's going to transfer it optimally. And that's what Bill was talking about, that he focused on with a lot of that medicine ball training. So our step one, normally I go for this in like a quiz way, but for the sake of time, the way that we perceive the ground and ground reaction forces is vibration. This is important. This was never taught to me in podiatry school. Yet, a majority of what a podiatrist treats is overuse injuries. To me, this makes no sense. Also, from an athletic perspective and really understanding movement efficiency, you have to understand what even are ground reaction forces. So your foot strikes the ground, it is creating vibration. Sound is vibration. So oftentimes, I'm going to hit my desk. So you think your foot hits the ground, right? As the foot hits the ground, vibration is created. Now, these are micro vibrations, so it's not like you're perceiving it to the level when you're on like a power plate or a vibration platform. The frequency of these vibrations, if you know vibration frequency, is around 15 to 20 hertz. So it's lower than a lot of the platforms that are 55, 60 hertz. Okay. But we have these vibrations that are coming in, and then that vibration is stimulating your system to respond, to essentially load. And the way that we perceive the vibrations through the bottom of your feet are through these nerves. These nerves are called mechanoceptors. This is where your foot becomes a sensory storyteller, is that the skin in the bottom of the feet, which is similar to the skin on your hands, has touch nerves that are called mechanoceptors, nerve endings that are sensitive to mechanical deformation. And if you see and you look at this, SA1, SA2, FA1, FA2, the bottom, FA1, FA2 are sensitive to vibration, low frequency, high frequency. Now, here's the thing about your mechanoceptors. 70% of these mechanoceptors in the bottom of the feet, 70% are corpuscles, which means 70% or a majority of the nerves in the bottom of your feet are sensitive to vibration, which means they are sensitive to ground reaction forces, which means by design, as Homo sapiens, we are designed to move. This is huge. We are designed to interact with the ground and the story that the ground is giving you, which is vibration and ground reaction forces. So to understand that is huge. This is where I do challenge people about cushion in shoes. If you are relying on the cushion or never getting the individual out of the cushion, then there is this dependency and a secondary weakening of the foot to the innate relationship that we have with the ground, which is where you could start to see injuries or a lack of full efficiency in human movement, right? Now, I understand that some athletes have to perform shod. Where you still want to think about this is you still have to establish and create the awareness to the ground. I call this barefoot before shod. It's how I work with athletes, as I want them to still get out of their shoes and to train their feet and to really connect to that foundation before they get in their shoes, because the shoes are inherently going to disconnect them from the ground, which is, of course, not what we want. We need to stay as connected as we can to the ground, as it is what gives us our energy. So the next phase of this that I want you to think about is that we are walking, we're running, we're jumping, whatever the movement that we're doing, your foot is contacting the ground, creating vibrations, which is ground reaction forces. The next step in the story is, how does your system absorb it? Because ground reaction forces are your body's potential energy. It's the energy, but right now it's potential energy. And that potential energy is hopefully going to be utilized as elastic energy to do something incredible. But it's not guaranteed, because the athlete and the individual needs to know how to get it from potential energy into elastic energy, which has to do with the understanding of the absorption and the storing of that potential energy. So this damping or the absorption, which of course has to do with fascia, is the next part of this story. This is where I want to talk about the muscle tuning theory by Dr. Ben O'Nig. Definitely check out his work. Muscle tuning theory is really a story of how we relate to the ground, to vibrations, to footwear, to surfaces, and how do we translate this to movement efficiency and to a myofascial approach to human movement. So the muscle tuning theory states that the way that we damp vibration is based off of a muscular, remember the muscles are wrapped in fascia, so it's a myofascial response that is surrounded around isometrics. Now, to understand this, I'm going to give an analogy, which I hope helps. Let's say I have a tuning fork, and I have a tuning fork somewhere. I'm not going to search for it though, but if I have a tuning fork and I were to hit the tuning fork and it's vibrating, how do you stop that tuning fork from vibrating, right? Quiet it. You're going to You're going to touch it, clamp around it, right? So I want you to think the same thing. As your foot strikes the ground, you are getting vibration. Those vibrations coming in could actually vibrate into your bones, into your connective tissue. But if bone and connective tissue vibrates excessively, we get stress fractures, we get shin splints, we get plantar fasciitis, we get Achilles tendonitis. So we need to be able to damp the vibration so that it is entering our system controlled. Go back to the tuning fork. You're going to stiffen around it. How do we stiffen? What am I doing? I'm contracting my muscles isometrically, right? And when you contract your muscles isometrically, you create a fascial stiffness or a fascial tension. Fascial tension and fascial stiffness is then going to protect the connective tissue and your bones. Now, it does go just a hair deeper, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to touch it lightly. It does also have to do with compartment pressure, which is a myofascial response. So the way that I teach from the ground up absorption of vibration and impact forces so that your potential energy is going from the ground into your fascia is through foot isometric exercises. Short foot is going to be the king or queen of all of these exercises. And short foot is essentially pushing your toes into the ground. I have many, many videos on YouTube talking about short foot in a myriad of ways where you are pushing your toes down to create stiffness in your muscles. Now, one thing I will say on this is that you have 26 muscles in the bottom of your feet, intrinsic muscles, and those muscles contract isometrically. So they create foot stiffness, and then your lower leg is contracting isometrically as well. That stiffness damps the vibration so you can potentiate your fascia. And here, this is where we are able to now convert the potential energy into elastic energy. And if you can see here, this is a walking gait cycle. This is a force curve of a walking gait cycle. When your foot strikes the ground, you get 1.5, 1.25 times body weight in vibration in potential energy. Your body damps it and absorbs it isometrically, potentiate your fascia. And then by the time you take a step and you swing your leg forward, you have released 2.5 times your body weight, which is actually demonstrating a doubling effect of the energy that came in. This slide says everything when it has to do with fascia and movement efficiency. That to walk efficiently, you have to have the capacity to double the amount of energy that's coming in. It is a recoil. It is like pulling a rubber band and releasing it, and the rubber band flies. That is the way that I want you to think about walking, right? So this is a fascial-based response. We were designed to move fascially. This is also why yesterday on Instagram I was talking about it, that walking, which is a fascial-based movement, does not burn a lot of calories. That is because it is designed to be efficient. Fascial-based movement is efficient, right? It does not have high caloric expenditure. So what does this have to do with our feet? This is literally my last minute that I'm passing the torch to Rocky so he can continue on this story. But what this has to do with your feet is that your foundation, your foot structure, your foot type, your foot stability or instability, which is mechanical. That is the mechanical. So that's where you can take a mechanical understanding of the human system and say it influences the kinetic side of human movement. If your foot posture is not stable, the rest of the system is going to be slightly compromised, and you will not be able to do this beautiful dance that I just described efficiently. You are going to shift into a muscular movement pattern. And the last thing that I will say on this is that I will give a quick story of a patient that came in, had ligament lax, severe overpronation of the feet. She came in, she sat down in my chair. She was like, Dr. Splichal, I am exhausted. It is exhausting to walk from here across the room over there. She was like, "Do you think it has something to do with my feet?" And I looked at her feet, and both of her feet were pronated like this one on the right. And I said, "Absolutely, it does. If your foundation is not stable, you cannot dance with the ground and transfer that energy in the way that we were designed, which means you are working harder than you should be." Does that mean put everyone in orthotics? No, it does not. Remember, I'm a functional podiatrist. It means train your system from the ground up. And now I'm going to pass it to Rocky.
Emily, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I found we're so much aligned. I knew we were. That's why we're doing this webinar. But everything we're saying, we're actually reinforcing one another. We are complementing one another, and we're putting it in different ways for different audiences. And I'm so excited for our 8-week mentorship because we're going to really attack our different audiences in
Yeah.
terms of how we manage the ground reaction force from the ground up through fascia. So Rocky, my man, let's take it away, my friend. We saved the best for last. You're the closer, Rocky. You got to knock out. You got to knock out Apollo Creed.
Well, we'll see what I can do about that. How about that? First of all, I hope I'm not the dark sheep or the black sheep in the family here. You guys really complemented each other so well, and I hope that I can carry the torch on. I love the fact that we have different ways of looking at the body, and they complement each other quite well. So uh, thank you. And I love the fact that Emily finished her talk with the phrase ground up. She just plugged it right in there so nicely. So we're talking about gravity. Yeah, we're talking about how our bodies are set up now that we are the most unstable mammal on the planet. At one point in time, we're on all fours, but then we decided to get up on 2 feet and our world changed. So over the course of human existence, we have evolved. And what that means is, if I can get this slide going here, there we go. That this is the holy grail, right? This is the golden fleece. This is a place that no human will achieve. But if we know that the closer we get to this, the more efficient our movement will be, the better tensegrity. There won't be excess compression or tension, but there'll be a balance between it. The joint spacing will be ideal and bone position will be ideal, as well as the bony structures, which we hear Bill said repeatable structures. And for me, that just resonated in me. I mean, think about one long bone, two long bones. The leg has one long bone, two long bones. The majority of the bones in our body are found in our spine, our hands, and our feet. We are encasing our nervous system in a bony structure, our cardiopulmonary system in a bony structure, our reproductive organs in an inverted bony structure, cages, arches, the arch of my skull, the arch of the roof of my mouth, the arch of my diaphragm. There, we just have the arch of my feet, all these repeatable structures. There's just a beautiful kind of orchestration at work here. So can we ideally bring people to a more centrated place through movement, through exercise, encouraging them to go in this direction? And truth be told, the majority of Western exercise programming is not achieving that very well because that's not the primary goal compared to yoga. I mean, we've got people all around the world right now listening in, which is just fantastic. So some of these people will be disciplined in Tai Chi, in martial arts, in yoga. There's chiropractors, there's osteopathy, and of course, we've got Rolfers. We're talking about fascia, so Ida's work. All of those had the fundamental foundation that if we bring the body into a more centrated place, things work better. Now, we are talking from the ground up, but I also want to acknowledge that things also start from the top down. And so I want to play one of these videos here. This is a cheetah. I don't know. I'm sure a few people have watched this before, but this is a cheetah about to run in slow motion. And what I want to show is that we are locked on target with our vision, our vestibular system, the righting reflexes at the base of the skull. This cheetah is locked on its prey. And you'll notice that the only thing that is not moving is the head itself. The body has to organize movement under a head that stays still. That means that that skull needs to flex, that needs to tilt forward and backward as the body moves around it, but it stays locked. There's also frontal plane motion back and forth, and there's rotation. Even though you see the head staying still, related to the rest of the body, there is tremendous amounts of movement. And you can see it from this perspective as well. That head is staying locked on. Now, of course, this is quite different. As a quadruped, we're going to see a different type of kinematic sequence, a different type of organized movement, that the forefeet are going to touch almost simultaneously. The rear foot are going to come forward. So how does that transfer over when we think about bipedalism? Well, here is one of the fastest humans ever to exist on the planet. And what you're going to see is he is striding along, the same thing's happening. That head is locked on the finish line. That's his prey. And he is moving all 360 joints of his body through three-dimensional space, going as efficiently as possible along the parallel surface of the ground that he's contacting. So when that foot strikes the ground, a whole bunch of things need to happen, which is what we're going to talk about. But I want to also acknowledge the fact that the head has to stay locked on because we're talking mass management and efficiency. So then I've just got one more video, which I love, to show you a little bit more about being locked on target. If you notice, that head is not moving on that owl, no matter if we're talking transverse plane, sagittal plane, or frontal plane. It's the vestibular system, it's the visual system, it's all of those, including the mechanoreceptors or proprioceptors that are telling the brain and the nervous system where it is in space. And now, even if this individual takes away sight, we will see the same thing is occurring. So now we just we rely on the mechanoreceptors and the vestibular system that much more without sight. So what I like to talk about is gait. And now, complementing what Emily's approach is, I tend to focus more on the mechanical side of things. And that is because of my teachers in the past. I have spent over a decade under the tutelage of Gary Ward with Anatomy and Motion, who he is the one that created what's called the flow motion model, which looks at every articulation in the body at 7 separate phases within the gait cycle. And we look at how they move in all 3 planes of motion. That's what the flow motion model is. It's a tremendous amount of information. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. But once you start to explore these joint motions, you will also see repeatable structures and patterns emerging. But with gait, when that foot strikes the ground, to the very next moment it strikes the ground, on average, it takes less than a second. During that time, every movement within joint structure will have occurred. And what I mean by that, in the gait cycle, we'll see the spine flexing and extending. We'll see there's a time where it needs to laterally flex to the right and to the left, or rotate left and right. At the same time, we'll see that the foot has a role to play. So every part of your body is involved with gait. And I think we tend to segment or isolate more often than is proper when we think about human movement. So Bill had mentioned we met in person. Well, we've met numerous times over the past, but this one in particular time, we were both at the University of Connecticut. I guess I'll share this story and to impress upon the point that everything's connected. I was invited to the University of Connecticut by the strength coach of the women's basketball team because, as Bill had mentioned, they had been plagued by numerous injuries that were keeping a lot of their players on the bench unable to play. In fact, the previous season, their last game of the season was in the Final Four against Caitlin Clark in Iowa, and they only had one player able to come off the bench. Everyone else was injured. So the starting five and one substitute, and they almost managed to beat Iowa. They lost by 2 points. But the leading up to that, they had had more than one season of almost season-ending injuries for many of their players. So did some work with the strength coach herself with the type of work that I do, looking at a person's structure. Where is their unconscious mind preferring a strategy to fight gravity? And then how do they take that unique structure or posture and move through space? So we know what the ideal posture or structural alignment should be. And we know what the ideal efficient movement should be in gaits. Couldn't we just compare people to those ideals and find out what's missing? And then once we know what's missing, can we encourage those missing components into the system again and let the nervous system figure out what it wants to do with it? So I did that with the strength coach who was dealing with her own kind of issues in the tissues, so to speak. And amazing things began to happen. She felt the change immediately because the brain was going to access or accept stimulation. It's going to interpret it, and then it's going to have to respond. So we gave it different stimuli. It had to create an interpretation, and suddenly things changed. So long story short, she said, I've got a player that I want you to work with. It was her number one star, and she had been suffering from two season-ending injuries. One was lateral fracturing and compression on her meniscus on her left knee. That took her out. She went through rehab. 6 months later, after surgery, she was back on the court. 2 months later, she injured that same knee with an ACL tear, running down the court, with no contact but the floor itself. And so she was out for that season, came back, and then tried to get into the Final Four. And of course, they didn't end up well, losing to Iowa. So here we are that summer coming into the upcoming season, and she's experiencing patellar tendonitis on her right knee. Her left knee is feeling better, but she's experiencing other things. So while working with her, I went back in time and like, what happened before this happened? What happened before that happened? Let's go back and create a timeline of experiences, because each experience you have in your lifetime, your brain's going to have to coordinate and strategize. What are we going to do with this? So what we found out was at her final year of high school, she badly sprained her right ankle. She didn't really do much rehab on it because she wanted to get back on the court because she was going to go to UConn, her favorite school. And so she busted through it. And unfortunately, it wasn't the great way to do it. She needed surgery on that ankle going into her freshman year at UConn. They did some rehab. And unfortunately, it wasn't necessarily as complete as it could have been, because happened was she needed to shift her weight off of the injured area, which was also restricted from scar tissue and not getting that joint to move the way it should, which put more pressure onto the left side, which led to potentially those two injuries on her left knee. So we got that right foot to start behaving, started to connect it with the ankle with the knee with the hip, the rest of the body, kind of connecting all the pieces together. And suddenly her ankle started moving like it hadn't been before, at least not since the surgery. And that patellar tendonitis, she walked around, I can't feel it. So it's all connected. Every joint has a role to play in human movement. So for me, I tend to enjoy following the bones. And what I mean by that is I look at how the joints are moving in a timely fashion with one another. I know that there should be a certain pattern, and I'm looking for that pattern. When I see something that is not lining up, then that gives me insight. That gives me a strategy. That gives me something I can do to either slow down something moving too quickly or speed up something that's a little sluggish. Try to get the better sequencing established, because the fascia, well, we've got periosteum, the fascia that surrounds the bone itself, but we also have fascia connecting through tissue like ligaments and tendons and the muscle. Everything is connected to the skeletal system and beyond. But if we can look at the skeletal structure and get that to move like the dowels in Bill's tensegrity model, if we can get those to move, then all the tissue that surrounds it is going to respond. And I can stop looking at blaming the glute medius for all the world's problems. Or maybe every year it's something different. Maybe it's the abdominals. One year was the transverse abdominis. Lately, it's been the diaphragm. We have a tendency to pick only one source of issue and we isolate it and say we've got to do something about that. But what if it was the way in which we manage the mass of our body? So we're going to look at two basic ways in which the body moves. If we could boil human movement down, we will find that there's two basic actions, and that is landing on planet Earth and blasting off planet Earth. So, landing on planet Earth, we call pronation. Every joint in the body has a role to play when hitting planet Earth. We need to somehow coordinate this deceleration of all this mass and momentum when we hit the ground. So the heel has a role to play in it. And in fact, well, Emily spoke of 26 muscles at the surface of the foot. Well, it just so happens there's 26 bones that make up the foot if you don't include the two little sesamoids. If you do, 28. But where those bones come together, that space, for lack of a better word, we just call it joint. But in essence, it's space. Is there too much space? Too little space? Those are both going to affect the quality of movement at that articulation. And when you add them all up, there's 33 articulations or joints in each foot. And we put them in these luxury earmuffs and strap them down. And well, that's going to have a direct effect on the quality of movement. Now, the foot itself is an arch. Of course, we think of the arch like this, the medial arch, but we have three arches. We've got the lateral arch, not as pronounced on the outside edge of the foot, but the arch points are where they contact are the heel and the fifth metatarsal head. Compared to the medial arch that everybody thinks of is the heel and the first metatarsal head. We have a third arch, which is the roof of our foot. That's arch shape and it's called the transverse arch. And those 2 points of contact are the first metatarsal head and the fifth metatarsal head. So we've got a tripod underneath our foot based on the ball of our foot by the big toe and the little toe in our heel. How well do we maintain a tripod? How well can we establish that when we're moving on top of it? Now, when we land, the arches should drop, the foot should get longer and wider, just kind of like a child dropping down on a trampoline, springs lengthening, dropping down, slowing down. And then we reach that isometric point where there's no more movement, just for a brief second. And then the trampoline rebounds and starts coming up. And that's what supination is, which is the exact polar opposite of pronation. So wouldn't it be amazing if you understood what every joint in the body has to do, or ideally should do, for the most efficient means of human locomotion? And if you know pronation, then you just flip it on its head and you've got supination. I am not the smartest guy in the room by far. I do not have my doctorate in anything. I love being in a gym, lifting heavy things and counting to 10. No rocket science. However, if we begin to learn these two basic human actions, then the world is your oyster. You'll begin to see the knee. How does the knee pronate? How does the knee supinate? How does my hip joint pronate? And how does it supinate? How does my right shoulder pronate and supinate? You'll begin to look at the body in a different means rather than an compartmentalized way. Do you have a shoulder that can properly pronate? And if so, that's great. But if not, then we start to ask reasons why. We might find that one area is taking on more pronation mechanics because somewhere else is struggling. So it's a different framework of looking at human movement. And it all feeds into that fascial system because those mechanoreceptors that Emily had listed are encased in fascia. And we know that there's some in the muscle. We know that there's some in the tendons, spindles, and GTOs and all that. But wouldn't it be nice to wake up the whole nervous system? And the way that we do that is by getting the skeletal system to move the way it was designed. And there's my 20 minutes right there. I'm going to give you this little thing, exploring human movement, foot behavior. What is it like when we move? Now, this person has his own unique way of doing it. It's not the most ideal, but we'll start to look at that a little bit more, find out what's missing. And there's my plug right there. If you, in the meantime, between now and February, want to learn a little bit more about me or find out a little bit more about what we do and the type of work we do, there you have it. Bill, back to you.
Rocky, amazing presentation. Emily, great stuff. I'm checking the chat to see if we have any questions. I know there were some questions about the mentorship we have coming up, but by all means, if you guys can all, check the chat as well. Yeah, this was very, very informative, guys. I really, really appreciate how we all, connected our presentations and really talked about similar concepts, but through a different lens and saying it in ways that relate to your everyday environment, which I think is key because we have so many diverse people involved in online from all over the world. So it was an amazing webinar. Let me pull up the opportunity for people if they want to take a look at what's coming up here in the near future, and that is this right here. Let me just do this just so we can share with everyone. So this is coming up soon. Take a screenshot of that. I'll bring it back on the online here in a second. But what's exciting, it's really going to be an opportunity starting February 4th. We're going to be really hitting this and going really deep through the fascia lens and the driver of performance from the ground up and really unpack that. Can transform how you access or how I should say you assess and coach and move, and really how you integrate fascia, feet, and functional performance in every one of your clients. So February 4th, coaches, trainers, movement specialists redefine how you assess, train, and optimize human movement, starting from the foundation. And, we have the outline there. I'm going to do a deeper dive, not just into biotensegrity, but how it relates to training with some exercises and drills and examples of how to manage that ground reaction force and really how to optimize it. And maybe what we all can do right now, guys, kind of go into what the sessions would be like in that 8-week mentorship. And I'll kind of start off, but I'm going to give you some case studies in that mentorship. I'm going to do a deep dive and bring tensegrity to life. I'm going to do a deep dive and unpack this concept of co-contraction and muscle pulsing so we can leverage the connective tissue system for free energy. I'm going to go into how we train the connective tissue system, how we allow it to adapt to our environment or put it in an environment that is unique to your needs, because everyone's needs are different. If you are a power lifter, the connective tissue system around the spine is going to become more like a log. And if you are a basketball player or a belly dancer, it's going to be more like a wire, that connective tissue. So it's going to be different. Ask a power lifter to play golf. He's probably going to have a challenge with that. I think Tiger Woods probably did too much vertical loading, and his connective tissue around his spine got too much like a log, and that was an issue. So we're gonna do a deep dive into that and understand that, and how that starts from the ground up and how it transcends through your whole body. So that's going to be important, and how the neurology plays a role in that as well, because fascia is highly innervated, 6 times more the proprioceptors than muscle. And the feet are very, very intricate sensory areas of the body, right? So that's a little overview of mine. Emily, if you want to kind of do a deeper dive into what your sessions are going to be like, that would be great.
Yep, absolutely. So I will be going into foot types. So this is a little bit on the pronation, supination. So you will get some mechanical from me. Yes, Rocky. But just making sure that we are all speaking the same language. To me, that's very important, meaning all you are speaking the same language as the three of us, so that when Rocky says supination in your mind, you know the triplanar movement that's happening during that, and then how that cascades up. A little bit of a revisit on the energy transfer. A huge part of my passion is how our feet connect to our core, meaning our pelvic floor, our diaphragm, and it actually continues all the way up our neck to our tongue. So there will be exercises. I see some questions in there about exercises. I teach the way that I tap into foot to core stabilization, this anticipatory stiffening that happens through that Usain Bolt. I could have gone on and on about how his contact time is so quick, and then how you do toe to tongue. So I'll be doing that. So there will definitely be some practical exercise takeaways once we establish that language and that appreciation of foot to core based off of foot types.
Amazing. And Rocky, if you want to go over your sessions.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at how do we realign the structure of your body from a standing kind of gravity presence, and how do we bring congruency into all three planes of motion through the load-bearing joints of your body, through neuromuscular re-education, kind of functional demand exercises, if you will. But we're also going to look at oppositional motion in the body. You know, that tensegrity model is beautiful. What we'll find is human motion is comprised of opposition, one bone moving in one direction, the other moving opposite, lengthening and shortening tissue, opening and closing joints, pumping mechanisms. So we're going to work on cogwheel-like actions to reestablish really nice communication between the entire system.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I think that's great. I really hope everyone got a lot out of this webinar. We are really excited about the opportunity to continue with you guys. I know I learned some things. You know, you're always, when you kind of commit yourself to excellence, commit yourself to be at the highest level you can be. You put yourself in the room with other people that are passionate. You're gonna learn something, and it's gonna make you more passionate. So, very grateful, Rocky. Emily, thank you so much for your involvement here, your commitment to excellence in the industry, and everyone else who joined us today. So thank you all. Hopefully we'll see you in a few months. Have a great holiday season with your families and friends. Be safe, be smart, and manage ground reaction force, and you'll be healthy. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.